Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Sustainable Stace. We're in the chicken coop, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today is what do you need in your chicken coop? In addition to chickens, of course. Stay tuned.
I'm Stacy Taves. For me, healthy food and sustainability are totally connected. You can grow it yourself. Nature is generous.
So guys, we're going to talk about roosts in the chicken coop first of all. Now, I've got roosts going on 3 sides of my coop, and the chickens can actually stay up off the ground and move around the whole coop. The more elevation you create in your coop, the more area for chickens to be, which means if it's only on the floor, they could be moist if it's damp. And also chickens, as they're coming into adulthood or maturity, they don't like being on the ground or on the floor at night. When a male starts to roost, he's called a rooster. That's usually around 5 months of age. So roosts are really important. You need enough space in roosts around your whole coop so that every chicken, male or female I'm talking, has a space to be at night. And if it's cold, they'll purposely try to be together so that they can share some bodily warmth. General rule is 18 inches of roost, so that's about 2 hand spans of mine. You need about 18 inches of roost per bird. You could get away with a foot, but I've just found that when you have enough space, your health, your plumage, your production is all better, and ultimately you're setting up your chicken coop so all your chickens are succeeding laying eggs as much as possible in a low stress environment. You want to keep them hopeful, helpful, healthy, right? So 18 inches of roost space, and if your roosts are up high, just be careful, because when the chickens come down, if they don't have enough space to come down, I've actually had experiences where it's too compressed and the roosts are too high, a chicken will fly down and land on another chicken and hurt it, and in some cases I've ended up with chickens that are dead because one lands on another and kills another. It's accidental, but it can happen. So I have my roosts about 1 meter off the ground or about waist high or a bit less. I'm going to stand up just so you see it. My waist is here, so my roosts are just a little bit below waist high. Just be mindful they need room to fly down. That's really critical. Okay guys, we're still in the chicken coop and we're talking about what makes it work best for chickens, and we're going to talk about watering your birds. Remember, they're a lot like plants. They need water, they need food, and they need light. So on the watering front, don't get too dizzied or mesmerized by all the watering options. You can go with just a bucket of water. Bucket of water will do it, guys. Just make sure you're changing and cleaning out the water every single day, and you can start really low budget with a bucket of water. The higher the sides are, with chickens still being able to reach it, the better chance that dirt and dust will stay out for a day or two, but you got to make sure you're always topping up water. But now I'm going to talk about my go-to preferred method for watering, which is one of these hanging from a hose. There's one right here as well, filled with water. This I wanted to bring to you for an up close, and it is described at a livestock or feed store as an automatic waterer. This has just got an automatic hose connection on it. So this part removes, and it's got a little spring on the end, just like a valve on a bicycle tire. And when you dial this up, that'll be actually down in that case. It'll lower the water level, and when you dial it the other way and it rises, that'll raise the water level. So you adjust your water level by turning this dial up and down on this little thing, and this just slides right on. It's hanging from a hose, as you can see right here. And just watch this, when I empty it out, it refills. And it's set to just refill to that line. And 100 chickens at a time can drink out of one little water like that. And you know, by the time chicks are 2 or 3 days old, as long as you hang your hose down to the right level in the floor of the coop, that'll be all that you need. That's pretty awesome, right? So an automatic water is way to go, especially if you can have water line running into your chicken coop. And for me, I can go down to -10 and my water line doesn't freeze, just the body heat of the birds in a fairly well put together coop. I've always got fresh water, and when you want to clean it, you just wash out the bowl with your hand, dump it over, and it reloads. So I just wash it like that, dump it over, and it reloads. And you're noticing this? I've got kind of a safety container underneath. This is just an animal feed bucket, which catches things that do fall so that the chickens can reach it. But if it is leaking a little bit, if there was a problem, their water would go in there rather than into the floor of my coop. I'm a really strong believer in natural surfaces on the floor of the coop rather than concrete. Chickens like to scratch and dust bathe, and it's really great to have a natural floor if you're able to get away with it. But I've got a rodent-proof perimeter of concrete around the outside, so that's a great way to go. Now we'll look at a few other options on watering. Continuing along the theme, we mentioned you could just use a bucket of water. We've talked about automatic waters, which are definitely my preferred method, but a few other types of waters you might see. This works really well on an S-hook hanging from the ceiling. The bigger your birds are, the higher you would hang it from the ceiling. One of the weaknesses of these types of handles is that when you've got it hanging from a chain, it'll slide one way or the other and all the water will drain out. So you can see that what I've done is modified it, and I've just put some electrical tape on two sides of where the hook would hang so that it can't slide one way or the other. This is based on a vacuum premise, so the outer jacket slides off. You'd fill up the water in here, and then you'd put this outer sleeve back over top, and then it would hang from the ceiling. And these are made in gallon increments. A gallon's about 4 liters, so this is a 3-gallon or a 12-liter. They come as big as 5-gallon or 20-liter. So they need some cleaning, they need some washing. The downside of these, as you'll see, this one's fairly old, is that it rusts at the bottom. Even though it's galvanized material, it will show rust over time. But that can be a nice step up from using a bucket. Now, the other option on watering would be one of these. The top comes off like this. You fill it up inside. When you're filling it up, you block the bottom so it can't come out. And this goes on the bottom when it's filled up. It goes here and creates a vacuum as well. The main body, this is a 5-gallon or 20-liter. I'll just show you what it does here when I screw that on. It detaches from the base, clicks out so you can wash the base, wash this, and then click it back in. It does not hang from the ceiling. You'd sit it on a block of wood. If you sat it on the floor, this whole lower area would fill up with muck very quickly, so you need some blocks of wood underneath it to raise it up off the floor of the coop or wherever you're putting it. There's a real weakness to this model, and I find that it's not well suited to resist sun and UV rays. The plastic starts to break down outside, just like the galvanized starts to rust. This starts to break down outside, so that's got a weakness to it as well. That's why I'm back to my much recommended this one, because this version I have hanging from a tree in the orchard as my outside waterer, and then I have one in the coop as my inside waterer, and the chickens always have water, and they're really no fuss as long as you can run a hose to them. So that should cover watering your chickens pretty well. Okay, we're going to talk about feeding your chickens. Cue the chicken stage left. Come on in, beautiful girl. Hi, sweetie. This is a commercial chicken feeder, so these types of pellets that you usually buy at a feed store right here, they come in various protein levels. Higher protein will give you usually better results, and 18 or 19% is the highest protein level. Usually something like 15 or 16 costs a few dollars less per 20K or per 45-pound sack. This will take probably 15K a feed. When it's suspended from the floor like this on a chain and a carabiner or an S-hook, it's a nice way for the chickens to get it without scattering the feed everywhere. You can just feed in a container on the floor, but the chickens will hop into the container and spread it everywhere, and it'll look like you just threw it in a leaf blower crossed with a lawnmower crossed with a blender. It'll just shoot everywhere, but that's a great way to throw your kitchen scraps. Bread crusts, kids' leftover food, carrot peelings, and everything from making a salad. This is a great thing to keep in your chicken coop and just throw scraps in. If you want to just start out with a little commercial feeder, this is just a baby version that takes about 5-7 kilos at a time. So that's a great way to go. Another thing to realize is chickens love to eat outside. They love eating grass and bugs and worms, and that'll keep them alive, but it probably won't keep them laying eggs. So how much commercial feed and the higher the protein level, the more likely you'll get eggs from your chickens. After about a year, the size of their eggs will go up dramatically, but the number of eggs they produce will go down. I also purposely start to harvest eggs for hatching for my chickens at around 40 to 50 weeks of age, just before they're a year old. That's when the chicken eggs I find are the best likely candidates for good hatching. Once the chickens are 2 or 3 years old, they might still be laying eggs, but their eggshells will be very hard. They'll be asymmetrical more often, and less likely that your chicks will hatch consistently. So that's why I keep 1-year-old birds and cycle out harvesting their chicks from them. One of the things I've done this year to save a bit of money and get more greens into my chickens is I've taken down the percentage of protein in my commercial feed, and I've bought bales of organic alfalfa. Alfalfa is quite expensive, but just a little piece of one section from a bale. I put it into this container on the floor of the coop every morning like a little breakfast snack treat, and all the chickens hop down from their roosts and they eat alfalfa, and that's where they're getting a lot of greens and protein, which works really well in winter if you're in a place where they can't go outside and scratch and find good food out of doors. So I hope that covers what you need to know for feeding your chickens. I just want to talk to you about 2 other factors for your chicken coop to have success. One of them is ventilation. There will be a lot of ammonia buildup if you got a bunch of chickens in a coop, and that smell can be really strong when their manure is off-gassing. You'll notice that in the background I have a window that opens with a predator-proof screen, and that way the window can be open and airflow can happen and there's no nasty smell in the coop. I only clean up my coop once or twice a year and it goes right into my compost pile. So ventilation's really critical. The other thing is that down the center of my coop I have a series of ceiling hooks. So I'm just talking about a little hook like this, a ceiling hook that's threaded. And then off of that ceiling hook I hang chain. And off of the chain at the bottom I have an S hook. And from that I can hang a heat lamp, I can hang a waterer, I can hang a feeder. So with feeders, waterers, and heat lamps hanging off of chains from S hooks, from hooks in the ceiling, I'm able to move anything around and configure it any way I want. So when I've got day-old baby chicks who come to live in here, I have all the windows covered, it's dark, it's quiet, the heat lamps are down low to the ground, and it's really comfortable and warm for them. But when I have adult birds, totally different feeders, no need for heat lamps, all that gets changed around. So with ceiling hooks down the middle of the room, you can set it up any way you wish, and it always works. So now guys, we're going to talk about the size of nesting boxes and how valuable they are. Keep in mind that a nesting box is where a chicken is going to lay her eggs. So if you don't have a nice place where she can lay an egg, she might lay it outside where you may never find it. If you don't have a good nesting box where she can be comfortable and relax, if it's hard on the bottom and not soft and padded, she might even break the egg by accident. Then she'll get in a bad habit of eating her eggs, because chickens actually really like to eat eggs. So here's a nesting box. I just want you to see the size of it next to my hand. This chicken's watching me. She's a bit broody. You can see it's about 2 hand spans across and about 2 hand spans deep. If you think of it as three-dimensionally, it's about 16 inches every way, which means 2 chickens, as in here. There's actually 2 that are laying in here, nesting, and there's only 1 in here, and she's a bit angry, you can see. She doesn't want me around her while she's laying her eggs. So nesting boxes, 16 inches cubed is really good. Don't put straw on them, because when an egg breaks on straw, it becomes slimy. Use sawdust. Sawdust that's dry is ideal, because with dry sawdust you have something absorbent. It creates a nice little bed for the eggs to sit on. And remember, no nesting box in the mind of a chicken is created equal. There's always favorite and least favorite boxes. Some of my boxes, there will be, up to 10 eggs a day in a box, and some of the boxes will have no eggs a day. So you want to have lots of nice dry sawdust to absorb moisture, and the drier the floor of your coop is, and the drier the boxes are, the cleaner the chicken's feet are going to be, which means you'll have clean eggs. And I'll tell you now, if it's raining every day, and you've got a lot of water outside, and then you've got moisture on the floor of your coop, you're going to get sick chickens, they're going to have filthy feet, and you're going to have dirty eggs, and they're a mess to clean. So nice clean eggs come from a dry floor and a dry nesting box with lots of sawdust in it. And then let's just finally talk about how many nesting boxes. The best ratio is 1 to 3. So 1 nesting box for every 3 birds that's laying eggs. So if you had 10 nesting boxes, you'd probably be good for about a flock of 30. So 1 to 3, that's a good ratio. Now let's talk about floor space in the room. Floor space is a good thing to think of. We talked about roosts already and how many roosts to have, but for floor space I'd suggest that you need about 3 square feet per bird. 3 square feet per bird. If it's tighter than that, I think your egg production will go down. So if you have a room that's 10 feet by 10 feet, it's 100 square feet, you could have about 30, 35 birds in there. I think 3 square feet per bird. Another thing that I'd like to talk to you guys about in the chicken coop is light. If you have LED lights, you're obviously going to save a lot of electricity, save a lot of money. Chickens in many ways are a lot like plants. They need food, they need water, and they need light. So we've talked about food, we've talked about water, but what about light? You need a fair amount of light for chickens to lay eggs. They'll stay alive if it's mostly dark or there's just passive light coming in through some windows. But windows alone aren't enough, generally speaking, especially in darker months if you're really south or really north of the equator. So I'm living, in southern Canada, but we certainly have times in the winter when our daylight is only 8 or 10 hours. Chickens need 16 to 18 hours of fairly strong light. Hear that? 16 to 18 hours of fairly strong light. So I have an electronic timer here. There's power coming into it, and there's power going out of it to multiple LED bulbs. And I generally have the timer set all year round to go on at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning and to go off at about 11 at night. But when it's sunshiny, summertime, long days, then most of the hours during the day the timer turns off. But it's on in the morning to kind of get things rolling. You hear the roosters crow if you got roosters at that time. And it gives them enough light in the darker, later hours of the day as well. But if it's really sunny during the day, the timer turns off because there's enough bright light flooding in. You get those 16 to 18 hours, you get 16 to 18% protein feed, and you have good water, and you've addressed the food, the water, and the light. And if you have a dry coop with enough space, you're going to have a great success rate on chickens laying eggs per bird on a daily basis. That's a good goal, to try to get 5 to 7 eggs a week out of each hen. Okay guys, here I just want to show you a little tiny chicken access door. It's big enough for a chicken to get in and out, and it's a great way, especially if you live in a climate that can be cold or windy, to conserve a lot of the heat in the coop and keep out the elements without opening a big, huge, human-sized door. This extra piece of wood got put across because my sheep just had lambs, and the lambs were coming into the chicken coop, and by putting this piece of wood in seasonally at least, it keeps the lambs from running in and kind of hassling the chickens. Now the other thing that's really cool about this, that's hard to show you on video, but I'm going to try, is that on the top of this door, which moves up and down, is a hook with a rope tied to it. I've also done it with a steel cable in the past. So right when I enter my human-sized door into the coop, I have hooked to a nail on the ceiling a rope that's attached to this little chicken access door. So I'm just going to walk over and show you what happens, because this is a nice way, without ever having to bend down at all, I can just go over here and I just let go of the rope, and there you go. I've closed the door and the chickens are in for the day. You can also buy automatic chicken doors that work on solar power. But that's a nice way to just have your chickens get in and out, keep the lambs out if necessary, not have all the elements come in, and if the chickens are running to get away from something that's chasing them, this becomes a very handy access for them to just cruise in quickly, and you can secure and open that part of the pen without even bending over if you just attach it to a string or a cable. So another little hint for success in the coop. Okay guys, thanks for tuning in and watching today about what do you need in a chicken coop. Just to recap, we've talked about roosts, we've talked about the size of your nesting boxes, the amount of square footage, we've talked about water, we've talked about food, we've talked about light, we've talked about ventilation. With hooks in the ceiling and all that going on, you should have all that you need to know to rock the chicken coop world, to be hopeful, helpful, and healthy. Keep on staying tuned to Sustainable Stace. If you've been watching this on YouTube, I just wanted you to go right down there in your bottom right and subscribe. And that means every time we put a new video resource, you'll have an email telling you so. Thanks for watching. Hopeful, helpful, healthy. Sustainable Stace.